Hexyz Force is one of those PSP RPGs that makes you wonder, how did this not get more attention? Released quietly in 2010, it was a full-scale fantasy JRPG from Atlus, complete with gorgeous anime visuals, voice acting, and a surprisingly deep story. But here's the twist. It's actually 2 games in one. You can choose to play as the silver-haired knight Cecilia or the fiery red mage Levant, each with their own campaign, characters, and perspective on the same grand conflict. The world of Palampolia is split between the forces of creation and destruction, and your journey shifts depending on whose eyes you see it through. This dual storyline isn't just a gimmick, it changes events, dialogue, even the bosses you fight. And speaking of battles, Hexyz Force uses a fast, turn-based combat system with team skills, powerful magic animations, and an almost Tales of style energy to the attacks. Outside combat, you'll explore towns, dungeons, and lush environments that look shockingly good for a PSP game. The art style leans toward bright fantasy, but with enough detail to keep each area memorable. And the soundtrack? Pure classic JRPG. Sweeping orchestral tracks, emotional piano pieces, and upbeat battle themes that still hold up today. Sadly, it slipped under the radar for most players. By 2010, the PSP was already winding down in the West, and Hexyz Force got a limited print run, making it hard to find even back then. But here's the thing, if you love classic RPGs with multiple perspectives, and you want something that feels like a lost gem from the PS2 era, Hexyz Force absolutely delivers. It's not just forgotten, it's one of the PSP's best kept secrets. Crimson Gem Saga is one of those JRPGs that slipped completely under the radar, yet it feels like it came straight out of the golden era of the genre. Released for the PSP as a spiritual successor to Astonishia Story, it delivers that classic turn-based formula with a gorgeous 2D art style, full of vibrant, hand-drawn environments and expressive character portraits. You follow Killian, a somewhat unlucky hero who constantly gets roped into trouble. The story is lighthearted but peppered with political intrigue and unexpected twists, giving it a perfect balance between humor and drama. The dialogue is sharp, witty, and often pokes fun at JRPG tropes, something longtime fans will appreciate. Combat is turn-based, but far from basic. Positioning matters, enemy weaknesses are key, and you'll need to think ahead if you want to survive tougher encounters. Boss fights in particular can be brutal if you go in unprepared, forcing you to actually use your skills and items instead of just mashing attack. The soundtrack is another standout, with catchy town themes, atmospheric dungeon tracks, and battle music that really gets the adrenaline pumping. And unlike many PSP titles of the time, Crimson Gem Saga avoids overly complicated systems. It focuses on delivering a polished, fun, and nostalgia-packed RPG experience. If you're a fan of the old-school Final Fantasy or Lunar games, this is like discovering a hidden chapter in that legacy. Charming, challenging, and criminally overlooked. This game is pure Nippon Ichi madness, a bizarre, hilarious, and surprisingly deep roguelike RPG that mixes superhero parody with dungeon-crawling chaos. You play as a regular nobody who suddenly inherits the title of Unlosing Ranger after the real hero dies in the tutorial. No pressure, right? Your job? Save the world by defeating the planet's ultimate villain, the ridiculously named Darkdeath Evilman. But here's the twist. The game's story plays out like a Saturday morning anime, with exaggerated characters, over-the-top humor, and constant meta-jokes about RPG cliches. The dungeons are randomly generated, meaning no 2 runs are ever the same. Every time you fall in battle, you lose your gear and are sent back to base. But instead of being punished, your character actually gets stronger with each defeat. Customization is insanely deep. You can equip different body parts, yes, even legs and torsos, that change your stats and appearance. Want a samurai helmet with a pirate hook hand and jet boots? Go for it. Combine that with a training system where you level up even while dead, and you've got a roguelike that rewards persistence and experimentation. The humor is constant, but don't let it fool you. The gameplay can get seriously tough. Learning enemy patterns, managing stamina, and adapting your gear to different dungeon layouts is key. And the more you play, the more absurd and epic your battles become. Z.H.P might not be a household name, but for fans of quirky, challenging, and endlessly replayable RPGs, it's one of the PSP's most unique treasures. Riviera is one of those games that looks simple on the surface, but hides an addictive, story-driven JRPG underneath. Originally a cult hit on the WonderSwan Color, then ported to GBA and PSP, this is the definitive version, with fully voiced dialogue, remastered visuals, and an anime-style presentation that makes the characters and story really pop. You play as Ein, a grim angel sent on a mission that starts out as divine duty, but quickly turns into a moral dilemma. The narrative is full of choices that actually affect relationships with your party members, leading to different endings depending on who you bond with. And here's where Riviera stands out. It's not just about grinding, it's about exploring carefully, managing limited turns, and deciding which events and items to prioritize before moving on. Combat is turn-based, but with a twist. You don't just equip weapons, each weapon has limited uses, forcing you to think ahead about when to unleash your strongest moves. Plus, different characters wield items differently, meaning a sword in Ein's hands won't behave the same as in another's. This encourages experimentation and strategic planning instead of button mashing. Outside battle, the game has a unique point-and-click exploration system, where you search environments for hidden items and secrets, spending precious points to investigate. This gives every location a sense of purpose. You're never just walking through empty corridors. The PSP version shines with its fully animated cutscenes, voice acting, and a soundtrack that perfectly blends melancholy and epic fantasy vibes. It's not the longest RPG on the system, but its replay value is huge, thanks to branching paths and multiple endings. If you love JRPGs that mix strategy, story, and a touch of dating sim mechanics, Riviera is an underrated gem worth revisiting or discovering for the first time. Blade Dancer is one of those PSP RPGs that quietly slipped under the radar, but if you give it a chance, you'll find a surprisingly deep and charming adventure. You step into the shoes of Lance, a young man whose journey starts on a quiet island, but quickly escalates into a quest tied to the legendary Blade Dancer, a mysterious hero from the past whose fate is closely connected to your own. What makes Blade Dancer stand out is its mix of traditional JRPG exploration with a crafting system that was ahead of its time for handhelds. Every weapon, armor, and accessory can be forged using materials you find in the field, making loot feel more meaningful. The crafting isn't just a side activity, it's essential to survival, as enemies get tougher and require better gear. The battle system is turn-based, but with a unique loonability mechanic. These special abilities can be chained together for massive damage, encouraging strategic thinking instead of just mashing attack. And because enemies appear directly on the map, no random encounters, you can choose when to fight and when to avoid trouble, something rare for its era. Visually, Blade Dancer still holds up well for a PSP title. The world has bright, colorful towns and varied landscapes, from sunny beaches to eerie ruins, each with its own atmosphere. The character designs are pure anime style, and the game's upbeat soundtrack adds a layer of charm that sticks with you. It's not without its flaws, the pacing can be slow, and some battles drag out longer than they should. But for fans of portable JRPGs, it's a gem that offers both nostalgia and depth. If you missed it back in the day, Blade Dancer is worth adding to your list of PSP RPGs that deserve a second look. Astonishia Story is a quirky little JRPG from South Korea that never got the attention it deserved, partly because of its modest presentation, and partly because it arrived in the West during the PSP's flood of bigger, flashier releases. You play as a young knight named Lloyd, tasked with recovering a stolen artifact, but the journey quickly turns into a comedic and sometimes unexpectedly heartfelt adventure. On the surface, Astonishia Story looks like a throwback to classic 16-bit RPGs with colorful sprites, top-down exploration, and a grid-based battle system. But where it really shines is in its writing. The dialogue is full of self-aware humor, poking fun at RPG cliches while still delivering a charming, if light, narrative. There's a sense of personality here that's rare, especially for handheld titles of its time. The combat is simple but addictive. Fights take place on small grids where positioning matters, and you'll be juggling a small party of characters with distinct roles. It's not the deepest system, but it's quick, easy to learn, and satisfying in short bursts. Perfect for portable play. Visually, it's bright and charming, with a clean pixel art style that feels straight out of the late 90s. The soundtrack soundtrack leans into cheerful, upbeat melodies, giving the game a warm and inviting atmosphere. Sure, it's not a massive 100-hour epic. You can finish Astonishia Story in under 20 hours, but that's part of its appeal. It's a compact, humorous, and heartfelt RPG that's perfect for when you want something lighter, yet still rewarding. For PSP fans looking beyond the usual big-name titles, Astonishia Story is a hidden gem worth dusting off. If you've spent any time in the JRPG community, you've probably heard whispers about Trails in the Sky, often followed by passionate fans telling you it's one of the best stories ever told in a handheld game. And they're not exaggerating. This PSP gem from Nihon Falcom delivers a level of world building, character depth, and political intrigue that you just don't see often, especially on a portable console. You play as Estelle Bright, an energetic and determined young woman, and her more reserved adoptive brother Joshua, as they set out to become full-fledged bracers, something like mercenary problem solvers. What starts as simple local jobs soon spirals into a web of conspiracies involving military secrets, hidden powers, and shocking personal revelations. The gameplay is a mix of traditional JRPG exploration and tactical turn-based combat, where positioning and timing can completely change the outcome of a fight. The Orbment magic system allows you to customize spells and abilities in ways that keep battles fresh and strategic. Where Trails in the Sky truly shines, though, is in its writing. Every NPC seems to have a personality, a schedule, and evolving dialogue that reacts to events in the story. Towns feel alive, quests have meaningful payoffs, and the pacing is deliberate, giving you time to get invested in the people and politics of the Liberal Kingdom. The game is longer than you'd expect, easily over 50 hours, but it rewards patience with an ending that's equal parts satisfying and a hook for the sequels. On the PSP, it's one of the richest, most text-heavy RPGs ever made, and for those willing to dive in, it's an unforgettable journey. This isn't just a strategy RPG, it's a political drama, a war epic, and a moral test disguised as a game. Let Us Cling Together on PSP is actually a full remake of the original 1995 classic, rebuilt with new graphics, voice acting, and deep gameplay tweaks. And yet, it still hits you with that same mix of brilliant storytelling and ruthless tactical battles that made it legendary. You play as Denim Pavel, caught in the middle of a bloody civil war between warring factions in the Valyrian Isles. From the very first hours, the game forces you to make impossible choices, decisions that not only shape the battlefield, but permanently alter the storyline, characters, and even who lives or dies. On the gameplay side, this is tactical combat at its finest. Grid-based maps, varied classes, terrain effects, and weather all play a role. Positioning is everything, and a single bad move can wipe out hours of progress. The PSP version introduced the Chariot Tarot system, letting you rewind a few turns to fix mistakes. But even that doesn't make the game easy. What really sets it apart is the branching story. There are multiple routes, each with unique missions, cutscenes, and endings. Want to stay loyal? Defect? Side with rebels? Every choice comes with consequences, and no ending feels purely good. The art is stunning, with gorgeous sprite work and hand-painted backdrops, while the soundtrack, composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto and Masaharu Iwata, is pure orchestral perfection. It's not a game you just finish. You live through it, suffer through its losses, and walk away knowing your version of the story might be completely different from someone else's. For strategy RPG fans, this is one of the PSP's crown jewels, and easily worth every hour it demands. Summon Night 5 is a tactical JRPG for the PSP that, despite belonging to a long-running franchise in Japan, flew almost completely under the radar in the West. The story takes place in a world connected by the Crossgate, a dimensional portal that allows beings from different realms to travel between them. You play as a Summon Knight, a warrior capable of calling forth powerful creatures and wielding unique magic, drawn into a conflict that blends politics, fantasy, and interdimensional threats. Combat is turn-based on a tactical grid, similar to Final Fantasy Tactics, but with the added twist of summoning mechanics that can completely shift the flow of battle. Each fight requires smart positioning, resource management, and making the most of your summons abilities. Between missions, you enter free time segments where you can interact with allies, strengthen bonds, unlock extra dialogue, and even gain exclusive skills. Visually, the game nails a charming anime style, with detailed sprites and beautifully illustrated character portraits. The soundtrack mixes sweeping, dramatic tracks with calmer themes, perfectly pacing the story's highs and lows. While it may not have the same budget polish as some of the genre's biggest names, Summon Night 5 delivers where it counts. Engaging storytelling, strong character customization, and high replay value thanks to multiple branching endings. It's one of those PSP gems that quietly proves you don't need mainstream fame to be unforgettable. The Dark Revenant is an action dungeon crawling RPG that takes a unique approach to perspective and movement, making it unlike almost anything else on the PSP. You play as Ares, a swordsman trapped in a deadly underground labyrinth, constantly pursued by the fierce bounty hunter Della. The goal is simple on paper: escape to the surface. But the execution is a tense, puzzle-like adventure filled with traps, monsters, and shifting pathways. What really sets Brandish apart is its rotating camera system. Instead of turning your character, the entire world spins around you, forcing you to think in 3 dimensions while exploring. This disorients at first, but becomes second nature, adding a clever twist to navigation and combat. Speaking of combat, it's real-time, with blocking, dodging, and carefully timed strikes being the difference between survival and a quick death. The dungeons are multi-layered and interconnected, each with their own themes, from crumbling ruins to lava-filled chambers. Secrets are everywhere, rewarding careful observation and persistence. And while the story is minimal compared to traditional JRPGs, the constant cat-and-mouse tension with Della adds personality and charm to the journey. Originally a remake of the Super Nintendo classic, The Dark Revenant improves visuals, controls, and difficulty balance, making it a must-play for fans of old-school challenge. It's the kind of RPG that sticks in your mind because it dares to be different, and because escaping its labyrinth feels like a true victory. When the PSP first came out, players didn't expect to see a full dungeon-crawling RPG on a handheld. Yet, that's exactly what this game delivered. Brotherhood of the Blade puts you in control of a custom hero, lets you pick from different classes, and drops you into a world packed with monsters, quests, and endless loot. For many, it was the first taste of having a Diablo-style experience in your pocket. The action is quick and satisfying. You slash through groups of enemies, grab whatever weapons and armor they drop, and push deeper into each new area. It's simple but addictive, the kind of loop where just one more dungeon easily turns into hours of play. Leveling up feels rewarding, and the constant stream of new gear makes every battle feel worth it. There's a main story about defending the city of Avon from a growing threat, but the real hook is in experimenting with your build. Choosing the right mix of skills and equipment can completely change how you approach tougher encounters. Sometimes it's about raw damage, other times it's about finding the balance that keeps you alive against mobs of enemies. What makes it perfect for a weekend is its pace. You can sink 10 to 12 hours into it, make steady progress, and come out the other side feeling like you've completed a full adventure. It's not bloated, it doesn't drag, it just delivers fast, fun RPG action that holds up even today. From the very first battle, Ys7 makes it clear that this isn't your usual handheld RPG. Instead of waiting for turns, you're right in the middle of the action, dodging attacks, chaining combos, and swapping characters on the fly. It's fast, responsive, and full of energy, the kind of combat that keeps your attention locked in every second. Each party member feels different. One might be quick and agile, perfect for slicing through weaker enemies, while another hits slower but can smash through heavy armor. Switching between them isn't just fun, it's necessary, since certain foes can only be taken down efficiently with the right weapon type. Boss fights in particular highlight this system, turning every encounter into a test of reflexes and smart team management. Outside of battle, the game keeps things moving with a steady flow of new areas, quests, and equipment. There's a sense of progress at all times, and you never feel like you're wasting hours grinding just to move forward. The colorful world, combined with a vibrant soundtrack, adds to the charm and makes exploration feel rewarding. What makes it stand out is the pacing. The main story runs around 15 hours, short enough to beat in a weekend, but long enough to feel like a complete adventure. Ys7 shows how a streamlined RPG can still deliver epic moments without demanding endless playtime. Most RPGs give you hours to grind, explore, and slowly build up your hero. This one throws all of that out the window and asks a simple question: can you save the world in just 30 seconds? Half-Minute Hero takes the classic RPG formula and compresses it into a frantic race against the clock. In half a minute, you need to gain levels, buy weapons, defeat monsters, and rush to the final boss before time runs out. To keep things fair, you can pray at shrines to reset the timer, but there's a catch: it costs gold. That forces you to decide if it's better to invest in stronger equipment or buy yourself more precious seconds. The result is a non-stop cycle of decisions that keeps you hooked and laughing at the same time. The game doesn't stop with just one mode. After beating the main hero story, you unlock different campaigns that twist the formula. One lets you guide a princess with long-range attacks, while another leans into real-time strategy. Each new mode adds variety without losing the game's frantic charm. The retro pixel art and tongue-in-cheek humor give it an old-school feel, but the speed and creativity make it stand out even today. Best of all, you can finish the main story in just a few hours. It's perfect for a weekend session, short, addictive, and unforgettable. Half-minute hero proves that sometimes less really is more. Instead of offering a light-hearted adventure, this RPG drags you straight into a world of blood, steel, and monsters. Lord of Arcana is one of the darkest titles on the PSP, mixing action combat with a grim fantasy setting where survival feels like a victory in itself. From the very first mission, it sets a heavy tone. Enemies are brutal, bosses are massive, and every swing of your weapon feels like it could be your last. You take the role of a slayer, chosen to claim the power of the Arcana, a legendary force tied to ancient magic. To get there, you'll fight through quests packed with grotesque enemies and dangerous arenas. The combat is slower and more deliberate than most RPGs, demanding careful timing and positioning. Getting greedy with attacks almost always leads to punishment, especially against giant beasts that can crush you in seconds. Weapons define your playstyle. Axes hit hard but leave you vulnerable. Swords balance speed and power, and spears give you reach at the cost of agility. You can even use spellbooks and Arcana cards to unleash devastating magic. Learning when to block, dodge, or go all in is the key to surviving. Fatal finishers with their violent animations make each victory feel raw and satisfying. It might not be as polished as other big RPGs, but its atmosphere and tone make it unforgettable. Lord of Arcana is the kind of game you play for the intensity, not the comfort. Short enough to enjoy without dragging, yet heavy enough to leave an impact, it remains one of the PSP's most unique dark fantasy experiences. Parasite Eve Third Birthday is one of those PSP games that feels different from the start. Released in 2010, it takes the cult RPG series into new territory, mixing action, shooting, and light RPG elements. You play once again as Aria, but the world she fights for is darker than ever. Strange creatures called the Twisted are destroying everything, and every mission feels like a desperate struggle to survive. The combat is what makes it stand out. Instead of just running and shooting, you're always on the move, dodging attacks and finding the right moment to strike back. The big twist is the overdive system. Aya can jump into the body of any soldier on the field, taking control of their weapons and position instantly. It's fast, chaotic, and fun. Sometimes the only way to win is by swapping bodies at the perfect moment and turning the enemy's attack against them. Even with all the action, it still has that RPG flavor. You unlock skills, upgrade Aya's powers, and decide how to build her abilities. Maybe focus on raw damage, or better defense, or faster recovery. Those choices can make the difference in tough fights. The story also adds to the mood, with mystery, tragedy, and some emotional twists that keep you hooked until the end. It's not a long game, you can finish it over a weekend, but it stays with you. Parasite Eve is short, stylish, and intense, showing how the PSP could deliver experiences bigger than anyone expected from a handheld. Valhalla Knights takes a different approach compared to many PSP RPG. Instead of focusing on flashy cutscenes or long stories, it gives you freedom to shape your own adventure. Right at the beginning, you create a party from scratch, choosing races, jobs, and skills. That flexibility makes the game feel personal, since every team is unique, and testing new builds is part of the fun. The gameplay follows a dungeon crawler style. Towns serve as safe hubs, while outside areas are filled with monsters and quests. Battles happen in real time with your whole party on the field, which can get chaotic quickly. Positioning and teamwork are essential, and going in unprepared usually leads to defeat. The challenge is fair, but it forces you to think about how your team is built and how to use them in battle. Progression is rewarding thanks to constant customization. You can create fast rogues who combine melee with magic, or tough tanks supported by healers. Each choice changes the way fights play out, and new equipment keeps pushing you to adjust your strategy. It's a loop that makes dungeon crawling compelling, addictive, without becoming too repetitive. Valhalla Knights may not be the most polished RPG on the system, but it has a rough charm that stands out. The campaign is short enough to finish without dragging, yet the freedom of building parties gives it replay value. For players who enjoy experimenting and want something different from the usual formula, this game remains a hidden gem on the PSP. Crimson Gem Saga is the kind of RPG that feels like a love letter to the golden age of the genre. While many PSP games experimented with hybrids or action-heavy systems, this one went back to basics with colorful visuals, witty writing, and classic turn-based combat. It doesn't try to reinvent anything, but it polishes the old formula so well that it feels fresh even today. The adventure follows Killian, a young knight who quickly finds himself pulled into a larger conflict involving greed, corruption, and betrayal. The plot mixes light humor with serious themes, and the dialogue often pokes fun at RPG cliches without feeling forced. The characters are lively, bouncing between sarcastic jokes and heartfelt moments, which makes spending time with them enjoyable. Battles are straightforward but rewarding. You control a party of up to 4 characters, each with unique roles like heavy attackers, healers, or magic users. The twist comes from the skill point system. Every level gives you points to spend on abilities, allowing you to shape each hero's growth. Some skills shine when combined with others, encouraging smart party setups instead of mindless grinding. Another nice touch is how enemies appear directly on the map. You can choose when to fight instead of dealing with random encounters, which keeps the pacing smooth. And since the game avoids endless grinding, progress feels steady from start to finish. With a main story that runs around 12 to 15 hours, Crimson Gem Saga is perfect for players who want that classic JRPG vibe without the endless commitment. Persona 3 Portable proved that even a massive RPG could work on a handheld. The PlayStation 2 original was known for its mix of school life and dungeon crawling, and Atlus managed to bring that full experience to the PSP without losing its charm. It feels big, but also surprisingly personal. You play as a student who discovers the Dark Hour, a hidden time at midnight when the world freezes and monsters called shadows appear. To fight them, you summon personas, manifestations of inner strength. By day you attend classes, hang out with friends, and build social links, which directly power up your personas. By night, you enter Tartarus, a huge tower full of shifting floors where the real battles take place. Combat is turn-based and built around exploiting weaknesses. Hit the right element and you get another turn. Get careless and enemies will do the same to you. It's fast and strategic, rewarding preparation and smart decisions. The portable version adds one big twist. You can choose a female protagonist, opening new dialogue and social links. Some 3D exploration was simplified into menus, but the trade-off makes the game faster to navigate on a handheld. A focused playthrough can be wrapped up in around 20 hours, making it surprisingly manageable compared to the console version. Persona 3 isn't just a port, it's proof that the PSP could carry a full-scale RPG in the palm of your hand. Monster Kingdom is one of those PSP RPGs that many players overlooked, but it deserves more attention. It mixes classic turn-based combat with a monster collecting system, giving it a style that feels familiar, yet different at the same time. Instead of relying only on human characters, your real power comes from the creatures you capture and raise, making team building the most important part of the journey. The story follows Vice, a young hero who lost his family to mysterious creatures known as abominations. His search for revenge leads him to the discovery of magical jewels, stones that allow him to summon monsters to fight at his side. Each creature has its own skills, strengths, and weaknesses, so choosing which ones to carry into battle becomes a puzzle of strategy. Combat looks traditional on the surface, but the jewel system changes everything. You can fuse monsters to create stronger allies, adjust your lineup depending on the enemy, and save your strongest abilities for the right moment. It has the addictive loop of capturing and training, but with a more serious and darker tone than most games in the genre. One of its biggest strengths is the pacing. The story can be completed in about 15 to 18 hours, which makes it perfect for players who want a complete RPG experience without investing dozens of hours. It's not as famous as other titles on the PSP, but Monster Kingdom stands as a hidden gem, short, strategic, and rewarding from start to finish. Dragoneer's Aria is one of those PSP RPG is that many skipped. but it still delivers a solid adventure. The story follows Valen, a young Dragoneer sworn to protect elemental dragons, ancient beings that keep the world in balance. Not long after completing his training, a new threat rises, and Valen is forced to defend the Guardians in a quest that feels like a classic JRPG from the PlayStation 1 era. The game sticks to traditional turn-based combat, keeping things simple but effective. Each character brings different strengths, and Valen himself can use dragon skills powered by the Guardians. Fights are about timing buffs, spells, and strong attacks, but they never feel too drawn out. The pacing is steady, making it easy to keep moving forward without hours of grinding. Its presentation is colorful and anime-inspired, with bright towns, open fields, and flashy effects during battles. It might not push the PSP hardware to its limits, but it has a charm that makes the journey enjoyable. The focus here is less on spectacle and more on giving players a clean, straightforward RPG. One of its biggest strengths is its length. The main quest lasts around 12 to 15 hours, which is long enough to feel complete, but short enough to finish in just a couple of days. Dragoneer's Aria may not be a famous PSP title, but for fans of turn-based RPGs who want something short, focused, and satisfying, it's a great pick for a weekend playthrough. Silverfall is an action RPG on the PSP that feels like a hidden gem. It borrows ideas from Diablo, focusing on fast combat, loot, and constant progression, but trims everything down into a format that works well on a handheld. Right from the start, you create a custom hero and choose to side with either nature or technology. That decision shapes your abilities, skills, and even parts of the story, adding replay value without making things complicated. Battles are simple but satisfying. You move through dungeons and open areas, fighting groups of enemies, collecting items, and upgrading your gear. Each new weapon or armor piece feels meaningful, and the loop of fighting, looting, and improving keeps you hooked. It's easy to jump in for a quick session, but also easy to lose track of time as you clear just one more area. The game's presentation is straightforward, with fantasy landscapes that shift between ruined towns, dark forests, and tech-driven zones. It's not the flashiest PSP title, but it has a certain charm, especially when paired with its soundtrack. The mix of medieval fantasy and industrial design gives Silverfall a unique identity compared to more traditional RPGs. What makes it stand out is its length. The main campaign lasts around 12 to 15 hours, short enough to finish in 2 or 3 days, but long enough to feel like a complete adventure. It's the kind of game that doesn't waste your time, yet still gives you a sense of growth and accomplishment. For fans of action-heavy RPGs, Silverfall is a forgotten PSP title worth revisiting. That's it for today's list. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. It means a lot to have you here. I hope you try and enjoy these games. See you next time. When people think of Phantasy Star, they usually remember the classic console RPGs or the long-running Phantasy Star Online. But in 2014, the PS Vita received an exclusive entry that many fans outside Japan never even got to play. Phantasy Star Nova, developed by Tri-Ace, the same studio behind Star Ocean and Valkyrie Profile. This game was designed to bring the Phantasy Star Online style to a fully offline single-player RPG, something Vita owners had been asking for. Set on a mysterious planet filled with giant alien creatures, Nova focuses on survival, exploration, and combat with massive enemies that feel closer to Monster Hunter than the traditional Phantasy Star Online formula. Instead of just dungeon runs, you manage resources, build up your base, and craft gear while taking down huge bosses with a party of characters. The combat blends real-time action with special skills, giving it a faster and more dynamic pace than many Vita RPGs. What really sets Nova apart is that it's still locked on the PS Vita. It was never ported, never remastered, and never officially localized in the West. That makes it one of the true lost gems of the handheld. If you're willing to deal with the Japanese menus, it's an incredible experience that shows how much potential the Vita had for big RPGs. Nova may not be well known, but for many Vita collectors, it's considered one of the system's crown jewels. Among the many RPGs that grace the PS Vita, Oreshika stands out as one of the most unique experiences the handheld ever received. Released only on the Vita, it's a JRPG that mixes dungeon crawling, strategy, and even generational storytelling. Instead of following a single hero's journey, the game tasks you with managing a cursed clan whose members have drastically shortened lifespans. every few in-game years, your characters age and eventually die, leaving the next generation to carry on the fight. This mechanic creates an incredibly addictive cycle where you carefully plan marriages, manage bloodlines, and ensure that your descendants inherit powerful abilities. It's almost like an RPG crossed with a family management simulator, and it gives Oreshika a depth that most turn-based RPGs never attempt. The combat itself is traditional turn-based, but with plenty of tactical options and flashy attacks that make every encounter engaging. Visually, Oreshika embraces a gorgeous traditional Japanese art style, inspired by ink paintings and mythology. The music complements that atmosphere perfectly, making the game feel both mystical and dramatic. While it was localized and did release in the West, it never got the recognition it deserved, partly because it remained locked to the Vita with no ports or remasters. For RPG fans who enjoy strategy and long-term planning, Oreshika is one of the most rewarding exclusives on the PS Vita. It's not just a game, it's a generational journey unlike anything else on the system. When people talk about the PS Vita, most of the time the spotlight falls on the big names everyone already knows. But every now and then, a game comes along that feels like it deserves way more credit than it gets. Tokyo Xanadu is exactly that. It's a title that blends urban life, Japanese high school drama, and supernatural dungeons into one experience, and somehow, it all works together beautifully. The combat has that signature Falcom speed, quick dodges, sharp combos, and flashy finishers. Each character has a completely different fighting style, so switching between them mid-battle adds a layer of strategy while keeping the action smooth. Boss fights hit hard, but they're satisfying in that way only Falcom knows how to deliver. Outside the battles, you get the calm of everyday Tokyo life. Walking the streets, chatting with classmates, finding side quests, it creates a rhythm where the world feels real, even as the Eclipse dungeons remind you of the danger lurking beneath it all. That contrast between slice-of-life moments and intense supernatural combat is what sets the game apart. Tokyo Xanadu may not have been the loudest release on the Vita, but it remains one of the most stylish and well-rounded RPGs the handheld ever had. It's proof that the system could deliver modern settings with just as much charm as the classic fantasy worlds we usually expect. Mary Skelter throws you straight into a world unlike anything else. A nightmarish prison that feels alive, with walls that pulse, corridors that bleed, and a constant sense that you're never truly safe. Instead of the usual fantasy setting, this game leans into a twisted fairy tale theme, where classic heroines are reimagined as blood-powered fighters trying to escape an endless labyrinth. The dungeons are first-person, grid-based mazes filled with traps, puzzles, and monsters. But what makes the game so intense is the presence of the nightmares. These unstoppable creatures stalk you as you explore, forcing you to think quickly, map escape routes, and sometimes abandon your progress just to survive. It gives dungeon crawling a thrilling layer of tension that most RPGs don't have. Combat keeps that same edge. Battles are turn-based, but every victory splashes the battlefield with blood, which powers up your characters in risky but rewarding ways. Push too far, and those same powers can backfire, so there's always a balance between aggression and control. It's a dark, stylish, and surprisingly creative RPG that combines survival horror energy with classic dungeon crawling. Mary Skelter is the kind of game that sticks with you, not just because of its creepy setting, but because of how different and daring it feels. At first glance, Muramasa Rebirth doesn't even look like a typical RPG. It feels like an ancient painting that suddenly started moving. The backgrounds are hand-drawn in breathtaking detail. Bamboo forests swaying in the wind, crimson leaves falling over shrines, and mythical creatures lurking in the shadows. It's the kind of visual style that instantly pulls you in and makes you want to explore every corner of its world. But the real surprise comes when the action begins. Instead of slow, turn-based battles, you get lightning-fast swordplay that's as fluid as it is brutal. You can swap between multiple katanas mid-combat, each with its own moves and powers. Some blades are quick and sharp, others heavy and devastating, and mastering when to switch adds a layer of strategy that keeps every fight exciting. The story splits between two characters, each tied to cursed swords and their own personal struggles. It's all wrapped in Japanese mythology, with demons, spirits, and tragic twists that feel like a dark folktale told through gameplay. Combined with the haunting soundtrack, every moment feels atmospheric and immersive. Muramasa Rebirth is one of those games that proves a title doesn't need massive budgets or endless marketing to be unforgettable. It blends art, combat, and myth into something that feels timeless, an experience that still stands out as one of the Vita's most beautiful and unique RPGs. When people talk about giant monster battles, they usually think of the big franchises out there, but on the Vita, one game managed to deliver that same level of intensity with its own twist. The Age of Demons. Set in a war-torn fantasy world, it throws you against terrifying Oni, ancient demons that crawl out of the underworld to devour everything in sight. Right from the start, Toukiden doesn't hold back. Every hunt feels like a life-or-death struggle where timing and precision matter. You're not just hacking away, you're targeting weak points, slicing off monstrous limbs, and using those pieces to forge new weapons and armor. That cycle of fighting, crafting, and coming back stronger is what makes it so addictive. What really grabs you here is the atmosphere. The Oni are grotesque and beautiful at the same time, like nightmares wrapped in ancient legend. The combat feels heavy but rewarding, and every victory feels earned. It's the kind of game where you go in for a quick hunt and end up losing hours, completely hooked on the thrill of the fight. Toukiden isn't always the first RPG that comes to mind when people talk about the Vita, but it deserves way more credit. It's challenging, stylish, and delivers that rush of taking down massive creatures in a way that feels both intense and satisfying. Some RPGs test your reflexes, others test your patience. But Soul Sacrifice Delta goes straight for your conscience. The whole premise is built on sacrifice, and it never lets you forget that every choice has a cost. When I first picked it up on the Vita, I didn't expect the game to lean so heavily into morality, but it hooked me almost immediately. The world is bleak, filled with monsters that used to be people twisted by curses. Beating them isn't the end. You then decide their fate. Saving them grants restorative power, but sacrificing them unlocks raw strength and devastating magic. That simple choice changes not only your abilities, but the entire way you experience the game. It keeps every fight tense because you're constantly weighing survival against humanity. Combat is sharp and chaotic. You can swing blades, summon firestorms, or even burn away parts of yourself to unleash forbidden spells. Every victory feels earned because you're putting something on the line. The enemies look like nightmares ripped straight out of a dark fairy tale, and the soundtrack adds this constant sense of dread that makes every battle feel bigger than just numbers on a screen. What really stuck with me, though, is how it makes you stop and think in the middle of the action. Do you keep your body intact and play it safe, or do you give up a piece of yourself for that one decisive strike? Few RPGs push you to wrestle with choices this personal, and that's exactly what makes Soul Sacrifice Delta unforgettable. I've played this game a lot, and that's exactly why I decided to bring it up here, because nowadays, you barely hear anyone talk about it. Ragnarok Odyssey was one of those Vita RPGs that really surprised me. Instead of going down the usual path of slow, methodical, turn-based battles, it went full action. You're dropped into wide arenas where enemies swarm around you, and every fight feels like an anime battle brought to life. What stood out to me from the start was the scale of the encounters. One moment you're cutting through smaller creatures, and the next you're staring up at a giant monster that looks impossible to bring down. That's where the class system kicks in. You choose from different roles, each with its own combos and fighting style, and mastering them keeps the gameplay fresh. The multiplayer was where I had the most fun. Getting a group together to face off against massive bosses wasn't just about button mashing. It was about timing, teamwork, and learning how to cover each other when things got chaotic. The thrill of finally dropping one of those giants after struggling for several attempts is the kind of memory that sticks with you. Even today, when I think back on the Vita's library, this is one of the titles that instantly comes to mind. Not because it was flawless, but because it had that one more mission feeling that kept me coming back. And that to me is what makes Ragnarok Odyssey so memorable. Sometimes an RPG doesn't need to reinvent the wheel, it just needs to remind you why the genre can be so captivating. That's exactly how Tales of Hearts feels on the Vita. While it wasn't a blockbuster in the West, For many players, it became one of those hidden gems you only discover if you dig a little deeper into the console's library. The story follows the classic journey of growth formula, with young characters drawn into an adventure much bigger than themselves. What hooked me, though, wasn't just the narrative, it was the combat system. The Tales series has always leaned toward real-time action, and Hearts keeps that tradition alive. Battles are fast, fluid, and reward you for experimenting with combos rather than just spamming the same move. Every encounter feels like a chance to test new strategies and see how far you can push the system. Exploration also has that nostalgic JRPG charm. Towns, dungeons, and overworld segments carry a certain warmth, almost like flipping through a familiar storybook. It's not flashy, but there's comfort in how it all comes together. The art direction, with its anime-inspired characters and bright settings, fits perfectly with the handheld screen, making it feel right at home on the Vita. What makes Tales of Hearts stand out isn't that it tried to compete with the biggest franchises, but that it delivered a genuine, heartfelt adventure. It's one of those games that proves you don't always need scale or spectacle to leave a lasting impression. You just need sincerity, and this game has plenty of it. The first thing that hits you when playing as Origin is the speed of combat. There's no waiting around for turns or overcomplicated menus. Every slash, dash, and spell flows into the next with an almost arcade-like intensity. Battles feel sharp and responsive, forcing you to pay attention to enemy patterns and time your moves with precision. It's not just button mashing. Every encounter feels like a test of reflexes and strategy, making each victory feel earned. The entire adventure takes place inside the colossal Tower of Dharm, a mysterious structure that seems to stretch endlessly into the sky. Each floor introduces a new theme: lush forests, mechanical fortresses, eerie dungeons, and with every step upward, the challenges grow more unpredictable. The design makes exploration feel rewarding, as if the tower itself is a character, constantly shifting to keep you on your toes. Another clever element is how the game gives you different protagonists to choose from. Each hero comes with their own style, whether it's swift, agile strikes, or powerful, magic-heavy combat. Playing through the story with different characters not only changes how you approach battles, but also reveals new pieces of the overarching narrative, making the journey feel layered and full of surprises. It's a game that thrives on its intensity, its atmosphere, and its variety. The mix of relentless action, evolving dungeons, and a world rich in mystery creates an adventure that lingers with you long after you've set the console down. There's a certain kind of magic that only a few games manage to capture, and Child of Light is one of them. From the very beginning, you're drawn into a watercolor world that feels like a storybook come alive, with delicate brushstrokes painting forests, castles, and dreamlike landscapes that look like they were taken straight from a fairy tale. The whole experience feels like you're flipping through the pages of a living poem. You step into the shoes of a young princess who finds herself in the mystical land of Lemuria, a place full of strange creatures, whimsical allies, and dark forces that need to be overcome. What really kept me hooked was the unique battle system. It's turn-based, but with a timeline mechanic that makes every action a strategic choice. Time your moves carefully, interrupt an enemy's attack, or risk being interrupted yourself. The combat feels like a dance where every second counts. Outside of battle, exploration is equally enchanting. You're free to glide across the skies with Aurora's magical wings, solving light-based puzzles and uncovering secrets hidden in the environment. The game also has a beautiful musical score, with piano melodies that shift depending on the mood of each area, making the whole journey feel almost like a moving painting. Child of Light is a rare gem that proves RPGs don't always need massive worlds or complex systems to leave a lasting impression. Sometimes, all it takes is a heartfelt story, memorable characters, and an art style that makes every frame feel like a dream you can step into. If you've ever wanted an RPG that feels a little rough around the edges but full of personality, Valhalla Knights 3 is exactly that. Set inside a massive prison city, the game drops you into a world where freedom has a price, alliances shift constantly, and survival depends on both your blade and your wits. Instead of exploring bright kingdoms or magical forests, you're crawling through grim dungeons, negotiating with shady guilds, and trying to carve out your own path in a place that doesn't forgive mistakes. One of the coolest aspects is how much freedom you have when building your party. You can recruit all sorts of characters, from beast folk to elves, and then assign them jobs like mages, assassins, or warriors. On top of that, the game lets you experiment with different skill combinations, so you're always tinkering with new strategies. Combat is real-time, chaotic, and sometimes downright brutal, pushing you to stay on your toes as you juggle multiple characters at once. What really makes it stand out, though, is the setting. The prison isn't just a dungeon. It's a living hub filled with rival factions, hidden secrets, and moral choices that can completely change your experience. Every decision you make, whether to ally with one gang or betray another, shapes how the world reacts to you. Playing through Valhalla Knights 3 today feels like uncovering a forgotten chapter of handheld RPG history. It's not a perfect game, but if you're into challenging battles and a darker twist on the usual JRPG formula, this one offers a surprisingly different journey worth revisiting.